Who is this guy, Epstein? Is he the head of the snake of this thing? What exactly is this operation? Is this how he made all of his money, or did he make it some other way?
Okay. Well, if you look at his history, there's a lot of questions that arise. He was not a college graduate. He was just handed a job. He may have been a smart guy, but usually you have, especially if you're going to teach at one of these exclusive private schools in Manhattan, usually it requires certain credentials and education level. But he bypassed all that. So it seems like from the very get-go of his young adult life, he was treated differently from everyone else.
Okay, so let me stop right there, and just because not everybody knows all this history, but it was a private high school, right, that he was hired to work at.
Yeah.
We know that Attorney General Barr's father was running it at one point. Do we know, was he running it at the time that Epstein was hired?
He was the one that actually got him the job. It came from let's see, who gave him the school? Yeah, it was Barr, the Attorney General's father, who got him the job at the school.
And normally, to be a high school teacher, you either have to have had, at minimum, a college degree or gotten your teaching credentials, right? It is my understanding he didn't have either?
No, I mean, he'd done 2 colleges, and I think done a year at each college. So he didn't have his bachelor's degree, and that's usually the minimum education.
So you're pointing out that's somewhat unusual, but in particular, we don't know that there was something suspicious particularly about that. It's just odd.
Right. But there's a pattern here that I'm going to get into of one odd piece after the next with this man's life. So the next thing you know, I mean, he only does maybe, I don't know, a year maybe before all of a sudden he has a job at Bear Stearns, the investment company. And, some kid told him, oh, yeah, this teacher's really good. And the next thing you know, he has no background, but all of a sudden he's this, quote, consultant in investments. And then when you look at his career in finances, I mean, he's suddenly this billionaire overnight. And, it's like you don't just suddenly get billions, but this man did. And he became his benefactor was Les Wexner. This man's very important in Epstein's life. There was even speculation that they were involved in some kind of sexual relationship for quite a few years.
A homosexual relationship?
Yes.
Do we know?
It's speculation.
Right.
There is no proof. But
my question is, does Lex live a gay or straight lifestyle as far as we know?
He was a bachelor up until in his 40s, and he finally did get married. He
started, and you can add to this, the ones that I know, he started The Limited, Abercrombie and Fitch, Victoria's Secret, and I just learned about Sephora is my understanding.
I mean, he's a big retailer. He does everything when it comes to all that stuff.
Right. I'm just saying that's an extremely impressive list of companies. I mean, every one of those is a huge success. But also, I don't want to stereotype, but I was going to say, being in the clothing industry for men, sometimes that would lead you to believe he might be gay, but we don't know if he is or not.
Right. There was just speculation. But as the benefactor, he gave this guy billions of dollars. He gave Epstein a lot of money. Now it's come out, after, quote, death, it's come out where, he ripped me off. I'm going after the money now because he ripped me off. That's a big question mark. To distance yourself from being a perpetrator in this whole operation, you want to become a victim. Yeah. And so that's the motivation, as I see it, that Wexner's now on.
What do we think? What do we think Wexner is worth?
I have no idea. These guys, they're financial titans, and basically they know how to hide money. They got offshore everywhere, and so it's almost impossible to determine what they're worth.
Did he connect with Wexner through Bear Stearns?
It might have come at some point a little bit later. All of a sudden, though, I mean, he was only at Bear Stearns for like, a year or two also. I mean, he skips from one job to the next with these huge promotions on each job. There was some kind of problem at Bear Stearns, and I can't even recall. It's been a while since
He was there 6 years, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's more than I thought he was. Okay, but he got set up by Wexner, basically. And Wexner is a member of, he started this group with Sam Bronfman, the Seagram's family in Canada. These guys are Zionists. And they're members of this mega group, they called it. And basically, Wexner, they went to him to write a report on American foreign policy in the Middle East. Now, this guy's a retailer and a very rich man, but I don't know that he's qualified to be writing how the U.S. foreign relations should be in the Middle East. But that's the kind of stature that he had with access to the policymakers of U.S. foreign policy as a Zionist.
By the way, Michael just handed me a note and says that Wexner's worth $7 billion. And one reason I asked that question is apparently Epstein wasn't, as far as we know, truly a billionaire. They have his net worth at like 500 to 600 million. So as we compare Wexner, his biggest client, he was managing his money compared to how much Epstein had. That's still a lot of money to make off of managing one guy's money, but it's quite a bit less than Wexner. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. And supposedly there are no other clients other than Wexner. That was another thing. They could never find, no one emerged saying that, I was a client of his. So, yeah, Wexner is part of this group where he has connections with Israel. And of course, the State Department and the CIA and Mossad. And so he writes this report basically saying that that what we need to do is go to war in Iraq, and Israeli policy is U.S. policy. And so we have this group of men, they are all Zionists, and they're dictating to the project of the 21st century, who are also dual citizen Israelis and Israeli first, making the foreign policy. So, I mean, that's why we have 9/11. That's why we have all the wars in the Middle East. We're fighting Israel's wars. And we have these people that are very powerful. They use their money. I'm writing basically a chapter. I've diverted from doing all these pedophilia scandals to basically analyzing the power structure that rules the world. And I'm taking on the Rothschild family as the most powerful and wealthiest family in the world. And they are, of course, Zionists. And so basically, we have a lot of the wrong people controlling the world.
But let me ask you this question about Israel. I mean, Israel is a natural, it seems to me, friend, geopolitical ally. We don't have many in the Middle East. So why does all this extra pressure need to be exerted on Israel to do U.S.'s bidding or vice versa when they're a natural ally.
Well, first of all, a natural ally doesn't attack another ship belonging to an ally. And they did that in 1967 with the USS Liberty, where 37 sailors died in the process. And that was a deliberate attack. Johnson knew about it and covered it up. So,
okay, I've never heard of that before. But that was the year I was born, so maybe that's maybe that's right. But come on, that's quite some time ago.
Well, a natural ally does not steal nuclear secrets, and refuse to sign the nuclear disarmament paper that was done in 2000 or whatever. Israel has not been our ally. They have basically been the manipulator of the foreign policymakers in the United States, who are basically dual citizens. Many of them are dual citizen, neocon. They're still in power. And I don't recognize them as our ally. They are basically agitators in the Middle East for the Greater Israel Project to expand their boundaries so that they control, as a larger nation all the time, Israel. It's becoming a bigger power. But here's another issue, and this is modern day. Israel has stolen not only the nuclear secrets from America, but they also, in more recent years, have stolen. There's a thing that goes back to actually Robert Maxwell, who was the peddler of the software Promise. Are you familiar with that?
No, but just to remind everybody, he's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who should be on somebody's most wanted list right now.
Yeah. And she keeps getting cited in New York and then in LA eating a burger.
Yeah.
But anyway, Robert Maxwell, basically Israel stole a software that compiles all this data in one place. And it's been sold to many different intelligence agencies and governments. And there's a back door that Israel has had with this software where they basically are able to spy on whoever they sell it to. And Maxwell went around the world, and it's like in 80 different countries and all of this. So they have, and Maxwell even, Senator John Tower, a Republican from Texas, he's now dead, of course, but back in, I don't know, probably the late 80s, early 90s, had to be 91 is when Maxwell died. So it was probably late 80s. He and this Tower, Senator Tower, he had access to all the secrets. So basically, they did this Promise. They bought the Promise at Los Alamos, La Sandia Laboratories, the nuclear center for our nuclear power in New Mexico. And they have this back door that Israel is getting all the nuclear secrets from. And it's become a major, major problem where, they're becoming a rival of Silicon Valley. And as a matter of fact, they're even recruiting people that worked in Google, and like the former CEO of Google is now working for Israel companies. So they're they basically have violated the security of all the nations of the world, and are a threat to the electrical grid.
Okay, so let's take it back to Epstein. I'm certainly willing to stipulate at a minimum that they are pursuing their own self-interest. So, but taking it to Epstein, it's your belief that they were establishing a blackmail scheme.
Yeah. all my research, and I've covered a lot of ground as far as all the different scandals in America and in Britain, but they all are related to sexual blackmail. They
is this an old tactic of theirs or a new tactic?
It's an old tactic. Actually, they're using kids now. As of maybe the late 60s, they started using children. I mean, pedophilia has been around forever. You know, there's certain people that are predisposed that way, and they've been violating children forever. But they've been using it for political purposes of sexual blackmail, primarily in the 70s up to present. It used to be where, you know, they have a woman or a homosexual kind of situation that compromises the VIP that they're trying to control.
And
is there any now they're using children.
Is there any kind of famous case of that was actually exposed from the past?
Sexual blackmail?
Yeah. Where Mossad in particular, everybody knows it was written about and disclosed that they had used blackmail against some foreign leader.
Well, it's something that basically a person that is being blackmailed knows that if it's exposed, their life is over. Either they die or their career is shot. And they're in high positions of power, and they want to retain that high position of power. So they will submit.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Typically, you're not going to hear about it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
I was just curious if it was ever.
I don't know if there's ever been a single case where somebody said, okay, expose me. I'm not going to do what you're told, what I'm being told. I'm not going to do it. You know, when you reach a certain level, you know, you work all your life to reach these top powerful positions. You're not going to be willing to, you know, give it away. And so you do what you're told.
But the use of children, we would all agree, is, I mean, it's a questionable practice to begin with, but whatever. You can get a guy caught with a prostitute that's going to be embarrassing to him and his family and so on, and you use that against him. You know, good for you, Mossad. You know, but when you're bringing children into it, you've really gone to another level. Right. And so what you're accusing Israel and Mossad of doing is pretty serious accusation that they are so indifferent to these children that they're putting their national security interests, or whatever you want to call it, ahead of these children.
Well, I think we should not single out Mossad and Israel. All of the countries do it. The intelligence services for America, the CIA, the intelligence services for Britain, MI5 domestic, MI6 foreign, the KGB, all of them are doing this for sexual blackmail, control over politicians and VIPs.
With children.
With children.
So you're accusing the CIA of doing the same thing.
Yeah. All of them. They basically serve the elite. They do not serve. There are renegades, rogues within all of these agencies that pretty much do whatever they want. They're not held to accountability. You know, half the quote intelligence committee in Congress, they don't know what's going on with a lot of these rogues within the departments. And there are some outspoken ex-CIA guys out there that are telling the truth about all this.
Okay, so going back to Epstein, kind of walk me through what your research is telling you, and obviously it's your research, like everybody else, is ongoing, but so some of this is your best guess as to how this materialized. Chicken and egg. Was Epstein into girls, and so he kind of had his own thing going, and then that morphed into something larger? Or was it the reverse? It started with Wexner, and Wexner setting him up and saying that, hey, here's what we're going to do. You're going to get paid a lot of money to bring in young girls and get them into getting politicians into compromising positions with them?
Well, I think he always probably had a desire for teenage girls sexually.
And then you think this started down in Palm Beach?
Yeah, I mean,
because he was in New York and then he was in Palm Beach. To be honest with you, I don't even know when he moved or how old he was when he.
Well, all of a sudden, he's got all this property. I mean, he's got a huge ranch in New Mexico. He's got an apartment in Paris. He's got the largest real estate in Manhattan, and he's got the Palm Beach, and he's got the island in the Caribbean.
But what's interesting is most of the allegations, at least the original ones back in 2007, pertain to Palm Beach. There wasn't much in the allegations regarding the island at that point. And then even these New York allegations all pertain to 2005 to 2008, primarily in New York and Palm Beach. I don't recall if they mentioned the island or not in that indictment, but it does seem to be, I guess my point is that Palm Beach seemed to be the epicenter of it, at least at the beginning.
Well, I think quite a bit happened in Manhattan as well, and on his island. But the case started obviously in Palm Beach.
So your best guess though would be he was doing this for his own gratification at first, and then at some point
it's hard to say. I mean, I think he was predisposed to go after underage girls, and at the same time, he might have been approached by Les Wexner and others involved in the Mossad and CIA to establish this operation at these various locations that he was suddenly handed. He didn't have the money to buy that Manhattan palace and suddenly have all these other ones. So he was given a lot of money, and basically this operation was handed to him, I believe. And Ghislaine Maxwell came into his life, I would guess. There's no specific confirmation as to exactly, but it had to be about 1991, 92. Her father died in 91, and she immediately came to America after that. So hooked up with Epstein.
So who would you speculate was the one that really connected him with Mossad? Would it have been Wexner or would it have been Maxwell?
I think it's both of them. I think they were probably in it together. I think Wexner did business with Robert Maxwell, so they already go back. And I mean, there was a meeting actually on Robert Maxwell's yacht in 1989, and Donald Trump was present on his yacht for that party, along with Ghislaine Maxwell. And Roy Cohn, who was dead at that point, but he had a law partner who was also at this meeting. And of course, Roy Cohn is Donald Trump's mentor in New York. And so this is like 2 years before Maxwell supposedly drowned, and Ghislaine headed to America. But she'd already met Trump in 1989. And I think basically they were setting the situation up that was going to be this operation for the early 90s to start with. I think that's when it all got going, because early 90s is when Wexner appeared on the scene, and Ghislaine Maxwell nearly around the same time, actually. So I do think the operation got going once he connected with those two.
What would be the explanation if this was about getting people in high places compromised, that you're hearing names like Kevin Spacey, Kevin Tucker, Courtney Love, Stephen Hawking? Those don't seem like people you need to get compromised.
Well, I think people in the entertainment industry are pretty important as far as PR. And so they're puppets for basically the cabal. They become puppets for the cabal. And
so in other words, it's always good having well-known figures speaking out in favor of Israel.
Well, that's part of it, but it's not just about Israel, but it's about always wars, and basically when it comes to wars, there's also trillions of dollars being made by the black market of drugs, arms, children, and body parts. Trillions of black money. Budget money. That's how the CIA operates. Basically, they run these operations, and they make trillions. We don't know half of it.
So, bottom line, what is your best evidence today of the Mossad connection that Mossad was paying Epstein?
Well, you have all these connections between Robert Maxwell, his daughter, Wexner, a whole bunch of other guys in this mega group that pretty much determine U.S. foreign policy that's very pro-Israel, involving wars all the time. And I would say that it's a pretty compelling case. And there's also compelling evidence that all of these players, these major power brokers, also work with mafia. The Bronfman family is notorious, and the Rothschilds are involved too. The whole thing with I always these stupid letters, the NXIVM. You heard of that operation? It's another child trafficking operation, NXIVM. And the Bronfman, Claire Bronfman and Sarah Bronfman, were higher ups in this child trafficking operation, and they're the daughters of Edgar Bronfman. So we have these basically crime syndicate power players working for Israel. They all happen to be Jewish. Now, let's not get into the anti-Semitic card, because every time you mention the word Jewish, then you always are slapped with that. That's why they're having all these laws made where if you even criticize Israel, you're violating a law. That's how they silence people, basically. They either kill you or they make laws that put you in jail, criminalize free expression. So there's a huge difference, though, between being Jewish and being a Zionist. Being a Zionist is basically about control of the world. And that these guys that are part of this cabal, the Rothschilds, the Bronfmans, the Maxwells, they're all about control, absolute control, where they have every electronic means, where they violate our lives and knowing everything about us, and they arbitrarily they do terrorists. I mean, basically, false flag terrorism is the way to go. That's the modus operandi of the government, and you cannot trust what the government says. That's why this whole thing about Epstein's, quote, suicide, more than likely he was either murdered or he's in Israel right now and he's probably been cosmetically tripped up so no one will recognize him. You cannot believe the, quote, official narrative of either the mainstream media or the government. They're always lying.
So you are absolutely not believing the suicide?
I think it is possible, but they're finding out that the supposed broken neck bones are also very common when a person is strangled to death, that there are certain bones in the neck that will be fractured. Yeah, I mean, and there's so many anomalies,
There's lots of questions about it, but what I like to say is, okay, but you got to give me an explanation that I can believe as to how he would have been killed, because that's quite an operation to pull off.
Well, they take out the cameras, so they don't have anything going there. And this is top security. The guy supposedly tried to snuff himself 2 weeks earlier. He has on a watch, and then suddenly they stop the watch, the suicide watch.
I get you. It's suspicious, but again, you got to come up with a better explanation as to what happened. Another inmate.
Well, and you have to also realize that, I mean, if they went ahead and prosecuted his case, he would have spilled the beans on all of these top people that have been compromised.
Well, that's a really interesting question, whether he would or not. I mean, most people take the fifth and they don't testify. If he was trying to do a plea deal to get a lower plea to give up other names, the question is, that's right, go back to, is he the head of the snake or not? Because in general, you try to get the highest guy and you don't get the Johns. The Johns, in this particular case, happen to be some very high-profile people. But at the end of the day, who do you want to put in jail? The guy that was running the whole operation or the guy that slept with some of the girls?
Right. That's why we need Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so we get the lower rungs to talk about what the people pulling all the strings at the top are doing.
Yeah. Well, look, I think, unless there's some ultra deep conspiracy going on here, I think we should still get to the bottom of it, despite the fact that he's dead. Let me ask a question in that regard. What do you think about Trump's reaction to this so far? Because Trump obviously is one of the ones that people are speculating about. You got Barr immediately came out and said, this is effed up what happened. There's going to be a serious investigation. You got Trump saying he wants an investigation and then flat out says, I want to know whether Bill Clinton has been to that island or not.
Well, I think we got pretty much confirmation that he has 26 trips on the Lolita Express.
Well, sorry, just stop right there. Is it your understanding 26 trips to the island or just on the plane in general?
Well, on the plane.
We're still trying to figure out whether he actually went to the island.
Right. Well, you can bet with cameras in every single room in that mansion, there's evidence. Somebody's got it.
If it wasn't destroyed prior to the FBI getting there 10 years late.
Right. But usually there's copies made.
Okay, so let's stay on Trump for a second. What's your assessment of his potential culpability in this and the way he's been conducting himself?
Well, I would like to think that he's different from all of his predecessors in that he's going after the pedophiles. He's made public statements where no other president prior has. And I understand that the incarceration rate of arrests for pedophiles has been a lot higher than all previous administrations. So there have been overtures, and you also have to give him credit for, I think, 2012 or something, actually twittering that we got to start putting these people behind bars, these pedophiles. And also, supposedly, once he found out that Epstein was recruiting one of his Mar-a-Lago girls, he had nothing more to do with it, supposedly. And also, one of the lawyers that was defending the girls or representing the girls said that he was the only one cooperating in the investigation. So, I mean, that's all to his credit. However,
and one more thing. I mean, for him to say, I want to know whether Clinton went to the island, that kind of sounds like somebody who's feels pretty confident that I didn't go to the island.
Right. Right. Supposedly he took one trip on the plane, but there is no evidence, obviously, that he was at the island. And supposedly he hasn't been in a relationship, a friendship with Epstein for a lot of years now.
Okay, but you said there's a but. There's a but.
Well, supposedly there was a case of a girl that was, I think, 12 or 13, where she has testified in court that Donald Trump raped her.
Katie Johnson was the made-up name, right, that she sued under?
She's one of the persons, but there was a Puerto Rican girl that was abducted in Waterbury, that was taken down in the 80s, and supposedly to Manhattan, where when Epstein and Trump were buddies, they partied together, and supposedly,
that's Maria something.
Yes. And so there might be some evidence against him.
And this was not a case. I thought it very interesting that I wasn't even aware of this case. And I also think it's interesting that you don't hear many people talking about it now, despite the fact that the media loves to beat up Trump whenever possible.
Right.
But here there was this Katie Johnson lawsuit alleging that Trump raped her when she was 15 or 16. She files it in 2016. This is, while the campaign is going on, and then dismisses it soon before the election
without like 3 days.
Without any payment, no settlement, allegedly.
Yeah.
So what do you know about that?
Basically what you just said. It's a whole big mystery as to, why, if there was no settlement, maybe she was threatened or something. I don't know. I mean, it's real.
Okay. So then
answer.
CNN and MSNBC would love nothing better to have this Epstein matter taking down Trump. But and I find this kind of interesting. I love bouncing between those networks because, as you know, you can't watch just one because you're only going to get one side of things. So just I guess it was yesterday I'm watching, and the lead story was the fact on Fox News was that the autopsy report had come out. So the full autopsy report comes out. This is breaking news, basically. It just come out like an hour earlier, and it's the 5:00 news. Fox News has it as the #1 story, and they talk about it for about 5 minutes. I go to CNN and MSNBC, and neither of them even mention it, let alone it being the top story. They don't even mention it at all, which I found very interesting. So Fox News is following Epstein. MSNBC and CNN, not so much. They're following it, but not near as much. So, which tells me they're not seeing the Trump link that they like to see.
I'm inclined to agree with that. You would have thought that they would have gone after it. There was something really to it. They would have gone after it long before now.
And they're not bringing up this Katie Johnson case. So I guess, I need to look more into it, but I guess she's been thoroughly discredited. I don't know.
I don't know either.
All right, let's move on to another president, Bill Clinton. What's going to happen with him, and what do you think his connection to all this is?
Well, I think he and Hillary have been involved with underage girls and boys. Mostly Bill with the boys, actually, and Hillary with the girls.
Do you live in Bali because it's a lot harder to sue for defamation in Bali? Is that why you live there? That's a very strong statement.
There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and we've been talking about the Bronfman connection, the XBIM connection, the Clinton Foundation. And the Rothschilds. There's Evelyn de Rothschild and Lynn de Rothschild that live in New York, among many other places. And they are buddies with. They were actually buddies. They got Epstein introduced to the President Clinton way back in the 90s. It came very highly recommended by Lynn Rothschild.
Let me break this in two, because I have read your chapter that you recently published on Epstein, and we'll be giving out the links for everybody to go read it themselves. But because I know you talk about the Uma Abedin emails with Hillary, so let's talk about Bill first, and then we'll talk about Hillary. Bill doesn't have the best track record when it comes to women. He's been accused multiple times of improper conduct. We know that he had this relationship with Monica Lewinsky, who was 21 years old at the time, something like that, in the White House. So he's suspect. So is it your belief that he was flying around with Epstein and having sex with underage girls?
Yes.
And are we just putting kind of two and two together because we just think that's the type of thing Bill Clinton would do, or do we have something more on that?
Well, we know that there was this rather extensive child trafficking operation for many years that Epstein and Maxwell were involved in. We know that Clinton was close to him way back since the 90s. And there may not be the hardcore courtroom evidence to convict. It's out there, but we don't have it at our disposal right now to convict him. But you put two and two together, and it's highly suspectful that he was involved based on his history and based on what we know about Epstein's operation. And I mean, so the odds are very, very high, I believe. Now, it'd be nice to have the hardcore evidence. It's out there somewhere, and I wish we had it.
Okay, and what about Hillary?
Well, I think the evidence is there on her too. This is a woman that basically has practiced. She was into witchcraft for many, many years. Probably still is. That doesn't make her a pedophile or anything like that. But they do some pretty strange things with the cult, ceremonies, rituals. A lot of satanic abuse happens in these kind of contexts, and I believe that that basically both of them are Luciferian.
I was going to get to that word, so you beat me to it. It came up in our first interview on our deep dive with a woman named Sloan Bella, and she mentioned Luciferianism as it pertained to Epstein, and it's kind of a new concept to me, so I've been researching it a bit. In fact, we hope to have on the show soon the head of the Luciferian Church has promised to come on the show. Because
cool.
I knew very little about it. I read about it on Wikipedia, but why don't you tell us what you know about Luciferianism?
Okay. Basically, it's anti-God, God with a capital G. It's based on a lot of deity worship, Egypt, Babylon, and it always involves a cult. There's occult secrets and knowledge, and there are a lot of rituals involved. And there's the Freemasonry. When you get up to the 33rd degree and higher in Freemasonry, they also have very many of the same kind of occult rituals they share. So we have here a situation where the people that control this world, I believe, are Luciferian. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation that the Rothschild family, the Bronfmans, all of these people that operate with the underworld of the mafia and all the governments together in their scheming for control over everything in this world, that they are not, they're certainly not Jewish. They say they're Jewish, but they are, I believe, Luciferian, and basically involve a lot of very, very negative torture of children, sacrifice of children.
Now, you would distinguish Luciferian with satanic worship, right? Or is it the same thing to you?
To me, they're very similar. in that they have their occult rituals that involve torture and abuse and death, sacrifice.
But
if you talk to a Satanist, they will probably tell you that they are different. They all differentiate. But as far as their behavior, as far as the occult common ground that they all have, and with their ritual, they practice many of the same things. And also their philosophy is the God is within, that the self is the important thing, and not some kind of God that's the creator of the universe, but
that there is no afterlife.
Right. And many of these people that are into Luciferian do not believe in God. They only believe in Lucifer as like the anti-God.
Mm-hmm. And would you describe it as hedonistic?
Oh, yes. They very much think, anything goes, including bestiality.
And how would they feel about the golden rule?
Didn't hear it. There was a...
Hey, how would a Luciferian feel about the golden rule? And it's a serious question. In other words,
they would think you're stupid.
Yeah.
Because it's all about self-gain. You use other people for your own purposes. Anything goes. They have no sense of morality or ethics.
It's all about doing whatever pleases yourself. That your time on earth is about enjoying your time on earth. Everything else be damned, essentially.
Yeah. And Aleister Crowley, the Englishman from the last century, he did the OTO, and he was a Satanist, and he basically said, yeah, do thou what you will, meaning anything goes, whatever you want is fine. As a matter of fact, he advocated child abuse and child sacrifice. And
so how would
look upon him as like a god?
So how would two sweet little Arkansasians like Bill and Hillary Clinton get mixed up with Luciferianism? How would that happen?
Well, I think the common ingredient is the desire for power. They have an insatiable appetite for power. And that's part of this whole psychopathic Luciferianism. There's an attraction for control and power through any means.
But why do you need to throw in the ritualistic part of it? I could see living by that attitude, but why do you need the rituals?
They actually, in these rituals, call upon interdimensional forces, I believe. I've not been to any of them to see for myself, but there are evil forces, I believe, that are out there in the universe. They're not probably in the physical form, but they can take the physical form and even take possession of human beings. And when they do these occult rituals, they open themselves up by volitional design, by the ritual, to having these forces take over. And that's when they engage in these horrific kinds of behaviors toward children, cutting them up, draining the blood, drinking the blood, eating their hearts, all of this horrible, horrible stuff that we cannot even wrap our heads around.
Have there been people who have been arrested and been put in jail for eating the hearts of children?
Well, this is something that they do not want out there. They, the whole thing with making sure that there's a silence on certain topics like satanic ritual abuse. Basically, law enforcement, because they're guilty of it, they're going to make sure that all of it is suppressed.
Well, of course, everybody tries to suppress their crimes, but eventually somebody gets caught. So I guess my question is, has anybody been caught?
there are cases of satanic ritual abuse where they are actually engaging these behaviors. There are cases, but you do have to look for them because they do not publicize them.
Is there kind of a most famous case out there that we could look up?
Well, because I don't really get into the actual details of it, other than what I basically have just talked about. I haven't really, but you can look them up. There's actually a research outfit in the University of New Hampshire that's actually researched all of these court cases of where there have been convictions with satanic ritual abuse.
So what about the island? What do you see on the island that tends to point to Luciferianism, etc.?
Well, you look at there's some kind of temple. It's Marduk kind of architecture where children in the past were sacrificed and tortured and sexually abused. That building, it looks like they, just by the design, the architectural design.
Are you talking about with the blue dome?
Yes. That's
you believe, you don't know, but you believe that there were child sacrifices.
There was some negative stuff that went on in that place. I'm certain of that. I'm totally sure of it. Yeah.
And then there's the sundial, the big sundial. Do you make anything of that?
Well, there's a lot of symbolism in the place. Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of evidence to suggest that there's satanic ritual abuse.
So we talked before about, is Epstein the head of the snake? Who's the head of the snake?
I would say the Rothschild cabal, the Zionist, Rothschild, Bronfman. There's a whole bunch of them. Maxwell, he's not around, and his daughter's pretty powerful, but we'll see if she gets prosecuted. But there's a cabal of super wealthy people who are Luciferian that do control this world, and I'm basically researching how far it goes back, and they took over basically in the United States with the central bank in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. There are international bankers, Jewish international bankers that were Zionists, the Warbucks and the Jacob Schiffs and the Rothschilds. They start wars, they end wars, they have major economic depressions. All of these are manipulations by design by the powers through money and control over governments that they do. And they engage in war all the time. And they back both sides in all the wars that they cause. And there is a group of this, it's a handful of people, relatively, that basically control the world through their power of money.
Two last questions. The laptop, the Wiener laptop, where is that thing? And I think it's there that you assert there's some extremely incriminating emails involving Hillary and Huma.
Yeah. The ex-Congressman Wiener had a file, he labeled it secret and all that. And it was confiscated, of course, by New York Police Department. And I'm sure the FBI have a copy of it, but the FBI is totally protective of pedophilia.
And by the way, to remind everybody, this is what caused Comey to announce the reopening of the Hillary email investigation when this computer was revealed showing a bunch of Hillary emails. And a lot of people say that Comey threw the election for Trump by making that announcement. A few days later, then he said, okay, we're closing it again. That was like 2 days before the election. But this is the computer that we're talking about that apparently, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, that the NYPD first had possession of, gave it to the FBI. This is now essentially going on 3 years ago. where there's all these emails and there's a lot of speculation about what's in them, but nothing has come of it.
Yeah. Well, in all my research, it's now been almost 2.5 years that I've been working on this. Not one person of a level of power, be it in Congress, not one person has been prosecuted and convicted and imprisoned for pedophilia. But these operations are everywhere. Every region.
Well, although Wexner went to jail.
Wexner went to jail for, I don't know how long, a few months. But for what he and all the others that he has the goods on have done, many of them should be spending the rest of their life in jail. So I am very skeptical that even as they say, well, we're going to proceed with our investigation, and now that Epstein's gone, now we can open it up so that we move on these others. I'm pretty skeptical. I've been doing all this research, and not one has really been properly done justice by the misdeeds and crimes they've committed. Not one.
Well, I mean, Trump, at least based on his statement, doesn't mind going after the Clintons, so you wouldn't think he's putting the brakes on anything over at Justice Department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I hope it goes forward. That's all I can say.
So last question goes to the plea deal and just what you think happened with the absurdly light deal that was given to Epstein 10 years ago.
Well, because of the fact that it was a Mossad operation, he himself said in his questioning by Congress when he was up for the Secretary of Labor, he said, it's out of your league, it's intelligence, and you do what you're told. And that's what he did. He did what he was told.
So that would be someone from the U.S. Justice Department in D.C. letting Alex Acosta down in Florida know that, hey, this particular guy, you need to let him skate because he's an important asset for Israel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot at stake, and so they let him go. Yeah.
So and Alex essentially took one for the team at his press conference, because he never said that at his press conference. Instead, he came up with some pretty lame excuses that ultimately got him fired the next day. Yeah. So, right, that would be your theory, is that Acosta couldn't say that at the press conference, that, hey, we let him go because he's an asset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it did come out that when he was examined or questioned by Congress before he became Secretary of Labor.
Okay. I promise this is the last question because I just thought of this and I haven't asked yet. Ghislaine Maxwell, why hasn't she been arrested yet?
That's a very good question. Why hasn't any of them, when there's supposedly all this evidence? That's why I'm saying I'm somewhat of a skeptic until I start seeing the Clintons and Ghislaine and all the rest of them that we are 99.9% sure have committed major crimes start being dealt with in the way they should. I'm somewhat skeptical. I don't know why they haven't yet gone after her.
Well,
she's probably hiding out in Israel now. I mean, they have anti-extradition laws there, where if you get there, you're free from any kind of enforcement of any crime anywhere else.